to try and create this thread between the survey findings that Yanni presented, the fantastic presentation around servant leadership, which is something that we really are also looking for answers in terms of leadership training, and David's presentation in a moment around enabling learning and development through change management. I wanted to just take us back a little bit to the landscape in which we are. And at a previous forum, I did present an overview of the skills landscape in the BPO environment. I'm not going to go through that again. I want to take a different view. And I want to start off by just sharing a little bit about what's going on in the post-school private sector landscape, because that's where we fit in to a large extent, but not exclusively. But I'm not going to dwell on the public sector post-school landscape for now. But what we have to understand is that we are inextricably linked at the hip. We have one common challenge, and we have to understand the strategic need and intent, the policies, and our own direction and strategy to get there. Otherwise, we're going to keep working in parallel and silos and miss each other. I want to just go back to BPESA's BPO skills strategy, because in the Western Cape, you have an industry body that's been incredibly involved working with you to try and address a sustainable supply of skills to support this influx of demand of international business that we're so privileged to have, and also to help us sustain our local market. So just a quick connection of that strategy and the Learning Academy. And then I'll stick to the subject, which is what is the role of the Learning Academy in the BPO sector? And I'll cover those key points before we get to Q&A. Okay, so post-school learning environment, and can I just start off by qualifying the next bunch of slides? It's not my content at all. So there are two documents I'd really like to refer you to, which will circulate, I mentioned earlier. The one is the Department of Higher Education and Training's white paper on post-school private sector, post-school education and training. And I really think you need to look at it as practitioners, because it's very clear around what needs to be done and what the intention is over the next 20 years. And a lot of what's been discussed today about how do we deal with disability, people with disability in the way we design, we plan, we engage, we bring people into the workforce. These things are all there. And we need to go back and understand that strategic intent. And we're talking the next 15, 20 years about fundamentally re-engineering the post-school world that we live in and become a part of that and not sit on the sidelines. So some of the, just quickly, what are those institutions? We'll be familiar with most of them. So the public universities, the technical and vocational education and training colleges, adult learning centres, private post-school institutions where the business schools fit in, where we as providers fit in, where the corporate academies fit in, the CETAs and the NSF, and the various regulatory bodies that are engaged. And that's kind of the ecosystem in which we operate. And it's important to understand, because we live our lives in the little silo there under private post-school institutions. And I'm generalizing, because not everybody's in the private sector. And we need to start moving outside of that and learning how to leverage the other initiatives. Here's some of the stats that were presented that I thought could be useful to you. It's about, the first one is about the rapid, call it exponential growth in the private post-school education. So just the number of providers and how they've grown over the past few years, you can see from literally the last 2 years, the per annum percentage growth is exponential. It really is. And I mean, there'll be many questions around it as to why is that the case. Let's also have a look at that's the split, the current split of enrollment. So not just the number of institutions, but what are the volumes, just to get things in perspective. And if you have a look at the private and then public FETs and public HETs, it gives you a sense of the scale and the number of people enrolling for programs. We look at really the footprint, and I think here it's encouraging to have a look at outside of Gauteng, Western Cape, Western Province has a really big footprint of private sector institutions, which is encouraging, but there's a lot to be done in some of the other provinces. But it speaks a lot to where in this development path the Western Cape is already. If we have a look at the qualifications that these institutions are typically offering, and these are the qualifications that their staff have. And we talked earlier about the skills and building this. I think you raised the point around at what stage do we start looking at ourselves and developing ourselves as practitioners? And we're asking that question, and it's a great question to ask in this audience. But at an institutional level, we also have to go back and have a look at the level of capacitation and enablement in both public and private, and what are people there for, and are they really equipped to deal with the challenges in business we're dealing with today. So that gives you an idea of the kinds of qualifications that our facilitators, our coaches, our lecturers, etc. have, who are addressing our skills need. And it's up to us to judge whether those remain relevant in today's times. If we look at the types of qualifications offered, there's a real predominance of business, commerce, and management studies. You'll see services featuring there as the third most popular qualification offered. And whether this is a push-pull or a demand pull response, I'm not 100% sure. The sense is it's demand-driven because it's the private sector responding to requirements from organizations, and in many of the cases it's internal training department responding to business needs. So it's telling us a lot about where the scarce and critical skill challenges lie and how we're responding to it. But again, I think the question came up a little bit earlier around IT skills and the scarcity of those IT skills, and it's useful to understand what's currently being done about it. So are you approaching the right people? Where are these people that are being trained? And where do they go to that we can't get our hands on them? In terms of level, a lot of discussion has been held around the value of, say, a level 3 qualification for entry-level learners into the BPO sector. It used to be level 2. What level should a team leader be trained at? Is it level 4? Is it level 5? Is it level 6? What should a call center or operations manager be trained at? And is that level commensurate with the complexity and the challenges of the role? Well, the predominance of those fields, as you can see, are and training is delivered at level 4. And I think it does beg a question as to are we addressing to a large extent gaps in underlying education, or are we responding to some of the more complex and specific needs of where business is now? And to what extent are we doing both? And we'll discuss that in the role of the academy. So if we this is all about where we're directing our resources, and are we getting the level of training right with the level of role, responsibility, accountability, and expected performance outcome? Are we getting that matching right? And then this provincial spread of occupations. At the bottom you can see just the breakdown of what each colour band stands for. But it is quite interesting as well to see that there's a provincial bias, obviously driven by different needs per province, different industrial or makeup of each province. So this information really, up until there, I think we'll send you the pack, and if you go and have a look at that document in the report, it really elaborates on it. It's useful to start looking at maybe alternatives to the challenges we face. Maybe we're looking in the wrong places for answers. Maybe there are already some answers. Maybe we are also tackling common challenges the same old way.